Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. My name is Caroline. I just finished my first year of medical school at Columbia, and today I'll be sharing my guide to the Secondaries application. If this is your first time here and you're currently working on your primary apps, I made a video on the personal statement, which I will link up here and also down in the description below if you'd like to check that out. First, I'll be getting into what the secondary application actually is. And then I'll be explaining sort of the timeline of when to expect these secondaries, when to turn them into the schools that sent you these secondaries. And after that, I'll get into the major themes that you'll see recur throughout many schools' secondary applications. And lastly, I'll be sharing tips on how I organize myself and approach the entire process altogether. So without further ado, let's get right into the video. So what exactly are secondary applications? The secondaries are a specific set of essays that medical schools will send to you after you submit your primary application. So your primary you can think of as a very general why medicine, these are the activities that I did, this is my resume, these are my scores, that you send out to all the medical schools you apply to. But secondaries are school-specific essays that really give you insight into what the schools want to learn from you specifically, and also what the schools value themselves. As for the timeline of the secondaries, it really varies between schools. Some schools will give secondaries to anyone who is verified, which means that the MCAS has looked over your primary application and has made sure everything is correct and sent it over to the schools. Other schools will send secondaries to anyone who actually has just submitted the primary application. So this could be before you're verified. The third category is schools that will look over your primary application and see if they want to invite you to write their secondary application. As for the time it takes to submit the secondaries, I usually try to stick to a 2 to 3 week turnaround time from the time I receive the secondaries. You really want to be vigilant in checking your email inbox as well as the junk box or the spam mailbox in your email account, because regardless of when you see the invite, what really matters is when you received it, so when the school sent it out. I've heard some people recommend a 1 to 2 week turnaround time, which if you can do that, that's great, but for me that was a little bit fast. So I generally tried my best to do 2 weeks. If I had to, I would do 3 weeks, and I actually did take up to 4 weeks or more to do some of them, so it's not necessarily a super tight deadline. I feel like for me, I'd rather spend an extra week on it to make sure that it is representative of me and my interest in the school than just submit the first draft that I have just to make that 1 week deadline or something like that. So after I submitted my primary application, there was a period of a couple of weeks where I didn't hear anything. And that was because my application was being verified by MCAS. I think I did receive 1 or 2 secondaries in that time, but it wasn't a lot, so I wasn't too stressed out. If you have the bandwidth, I would highly recommend starting to pre-write your secondaries during this time. This is basically what it sounds like. You're writing the essays for the prompts that you haven't received yet. And generally, this is a good idea because the prompts from each school don't really change that much year to year. On specific websites such as SDN, you'll find threads where people actually compile essay topics from previous years. And generally, these are pretty accurate and they have a very comprehensive listing of like the specific essays from each school. So I would recommend going to those websites and copying and pasting those prompts into a master doc. After you highlight and color code for each school the types of essays that you have, I'd recommend going to the top of the document and listing out those specific themes, bulleting or brainstorming ideas under them. This will make everything a lot more digestible. It won't be like you have 200 different essays to write. It'll be that you have around like 5 or 6 general essay themes with a few additional topics to write about. If you have the time to pre-write, do so. If you don't, then it's okay. Just do your best to work on it as you go and everything will turn out fine. One other thing to take note when you're pre-writing is that you can have a general draft for each theme, but make sure at some point you look at the school specific question and you tailor that essay towards that question. Really make sure that you are following the prompts and following the word counts. And now it's time to move on to the specific essay themes and pieces of advice on how to approach each of them. Before we dive into this though, I want to introduce the sponsor of today's video, Motivate MD. Motivate MD is a company that specializes in helping you get into the medical school of your dreams. They have a team of over 50 medical students and doctors across the country, and chances are they have editors who go to the institutions that you're filling out these secondaries for. This is super important because then they'll be able to give you insights and pieces of advice that people who don't go to those schools wouldn't necessarily know. Their team is here to guide you through every step of the application process, from the primary apps to the secondary apps to the interview prep process, at a price that pre-meds can actually afford. They've had wonderful reviews and are 100% satisfaction guaranteed. And if you're interested in checking out any of their packages, I'll include Becca's number here and also in the description below. She's amazing. You can ask her any questions that you want about the packages, and she's here to support you if you choose to go with Motivate MD. I'll put a link to their resources down below, and you can also use the code Caroline for 5% off any package of your choice. So thank you, Motivate MD, for sponsoring today's video, and let's get back into the most common essay themes. So today I'll be going over the 3 most common essay themes: diversity, challenges or adversity, and the 𝐏𝐋𝐀𝐘𝐋𝐈𝐒 school essay. So let's start with the diversity prompt. There's a couple of reasons I think schools ask these prompts, and they're also reflected in the ways that different schools ask them. Some schools will ask along the lines of, tell me about a time where you've worked with populations different from yourself. So this is sort of assessing whether you have the skills to be accepting of other cultures, whether you are able to, let's say, communicate through language barrier, through creative means, if you're able to problem solve. Other schools will ask, what will you contribute to the med school class? And this is important because it's so much more fun to learn alongside classmates who are different from yourselves, who have different interests and backgrounds and talents than yourself, because it adds to the flavor of the class. Thirdly, it's important to have future doctors reflect the communities that they serve. In those 3 general senses, that's why the diversity essay is being asked. It's important to think beyond the traditional notions of diversity. So I'll challenge you to think about your cultural heritage, your upbringing, any talents that you have if you love art and music in addition to science and medicine. Some other ideas you can talk about are if you have any international experiences, if you lived abroad for any point in your life, if you studied something other than science in undergrad, like history or dance or writing. I think that could also be super interesting because that gives the interviewer something to talk about in your future interviews, and it also just gives insight to the med schools into what you are invested in and what you are interested in. It's sort of like the show and then tell, the demonstration of your background and then explaining sort of what that means in the future for your career and as a physician, but also just like in your future in general as a person. So moving on from the diversity prompt, now we're going to be talking about the challenge or adversity prompt. The challenge essay really wants to pull out from you your resilience and your problem-solving techniques and your creative methods and how to address challenges that come up. What's most important, again, it's the show and then tell. It's the past and then the future. So explain what happened. Don't necessarily dwell on that. The second part of the future-looking sort of growth side is as important or more important. So you can emphasize what you've learned from this challenge. If you were to face another challenge similar to this in the future, how you would overcome it, and really how this has shaped your worldview. So TLDR, explain how you approach the situation, what you learned from it, and how you'll bring these experiences with you, these problem-solving skills that you've developed with you into the future. So now we'll be moving past the challenges and adversity essay into the 𝐏𝐋𝐀𝐘𝐋𝐈𝐒 school essay. So this is the Why Us essay, and it's really important for this essay that you do your research. They want to know why you're applying to their specific school, and if they were to accept you, why would you choose to go? And so for this, it's important to, take advantage of all the resources that are there. You can go online to their website and look at the different tracks that they have. For example, if they have a specific narrative medicine track and you're interested in writing, the humanities, and the arts, that could be something that you write about in your essay. Think broadly for this. So it could be personal reasons. Maybe your family is really close to where the school is. It could be professional reasons. If there's faculty at that school that you really want to connect with, you can think of location reasons. Again, that's sort of personal, but also is this location serving the community that you want to work with in the future? could be potentially important to you to write about the clinical experiences that you'll be engaging with. So the specific patient populations that you want to be working with, if there are free clinics, the specific community organizations that are around the area of the school, that can be also interesting. If you're interested in any activities or clubs that the school has, you could definitely write about that in your essay and explain your interest. And it never hurts to bring your previous experiences in conversation with your future experiences you hope to have at that school. And those are the top 3 that I wanted to cover, but I also wanted to say sometimes schools have essays where they're like, is there anything else that you want to tell us? So you can go into how COVID-19 has affected you. You could explain if there's any discrepancies in your transcript or if there's anything else that you want to make clear. And sometimes schools don't necessarily ask for a why us essay. And in this case, you can maybe use that space to give more specifics about why you're interested in their school. And lastly, I'm going to be getting into just some tips on how I stayed organized throughout this very voluminous process. There's a huge volume of schools, of essays that you have to keep track of. Firstly, I would recommend for you to keep a spreadsheet just to keep everything organized. You're going to have a lot of schools and a lot of hard and soft deadlines to keep track of. So it could be helpful for you to make a simple Google Sheets or Excel spreadsheet that just lists the schools and lists the tasks that you have to get done for each school. You know, when you receive the secondary, when you're hoping to turn it in, when you actually turn it in, if you get an interview invite, when you scheduled it for. It could also be helpful to just have a notes column for each school as well. If you have any questions or anything you want to make sure you remember to do for each school, just leave it there. And I'll include the template for my own spreadsheet down in the description below. The second point I want to make here is that it's okay to take a weekend off. I think sometimes, especially if you're, working another job, or even if you're just working on applications, it can get pretty tiring because you're just writing all day. It really is a reflective writing process. So it can feel a bit tiring at times. And so it's okay that if you need to take a breather, if you need to take a break, do what's best for you. Thirdly, it can be helpful to think about what impression am I leaving the schools with about me? So for this, it's important to just, write about what you truly care about, because the schools can tell from your responses, from, the brainstorming that you're doing for each prompt, what really matters to you. And so you want to make sure that that actually goes through to the school, and see if you could even ask a close friend, family member, the main points they got from each essay, and maybe ask for advice on how you can make what you want to get through. And a lot of times with the word count and everything, there's a lot you want to say, and there's not that much room to say it in. So it's important to know which parts that you can cut down on, know which parts you can condense, know which parts you can maybe elaborate a little bit more on. And that takes practice, that takes time, and sometimes it takes support from others around you. And yeah, thank you so much again for sticking with me. I hope you have the most wonderful time reflecting on yourself during this process. And one thing that I tried to keep in mind throughout this entire application cycle is just don't think about the primary, the secondary, the interviews as just hurdles to jump through. Think about it as another opportunity for you to show off your amazing self. So be genuine, be authentic, and try your best. You got this. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below, and make sure to subscribe and like this video for future videos like these. And I'll see you in the next video. Mwah!